It's been very troubling. I've become very private about my family because of the threats. I've been called the N-word so many times that I don't even think I hear it anymore. But a lot of ugly and nasty things about me, but just with the purpose of you should go and intimidate and threaten this person and their family because of certain prosecutions.
That was Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis at the Revolt World Festival over the weekend on the shocking level of racially charged threats and hatred that she's receiving, that her loved ones have faced, as she simply does her job and pursues her criminal election interference case against the disgraced ex-president and 18 of his co-defendants. DA Willis says her staff and her daughters have been targeted. Even her 85-year-old father and her ex-husband have had unwelcome visitors on their doorsteps trying to intimidate Willis after having their private information posted online, along with racial slurs and suggestions of violence. All of it, Willis says, while ugly and troubling, is also, quote, a waste of time that will not deter her from doing her job. We're back with Andrew and Claire. Again, you go back to gang prosecutions. You go back to Mexican drug cartel prosecutions to find the parallels to what Trump supporters and Trump is doing to these judges and prosecutors.
It is so unreal that we're sitting at a table discussing that the former leader of the free world is making statements knowing darn well the sort of call and response effect he has. I mean, he lived through January 6th. That's what it was about, was the call and response. You have Fani Willis speaking out, but the same thing is going on with respect to the judge overseeing the D.C. charges. Today, Donald Trump spoke in threatening terms, in my view, with respect to the judge who issued the opinion against him that we just spent the last segment talking about. Something terrible is going to happen, and we're all going to have been sitting here going, we know that's what it is. And just to add one insult to injury, in the Donald Trump's filing in D.C. with respect to the so-called gag order, because that's an issue that's pending and it's ripe. I mean, you can't think of a more important time. The import of the brief that Donald Trump submitted was to say, I'm not responsible for anything a third party does. I can say whatever I want about judges, jurors, prosecutors, family members. It's my First Amendment right to say any of that. And if there's someone who responds, it's not on me. To me, that is the part of that brief and what's going on that is so dangerous. It'll be very interesting to see how the D.C. judge and the other judges who are overseeing Trump on bail, how they respond to this increased level of serious risk of violence.
I haven't heard you say before, and I was out sick yesterday, so if I missed it, I'm sorry, that something terrible is going to happen. I said that the day I saw the Jack Smith side's filing in this case. Say more about why you think that's the case.
Well, I mean, again, this is not me sort of trying to be prognosticating. Look at Paul Pelosi. Look at the woman who is now being prosecuted for having threatened the federal judge overseeing the D.C. indictment. Those are real examples of the call and response in the exact same way that there are scores and scores and scores of people who are being prosecuted in Washington, D.C. in connection with what happened on January 6th. And why do they all say that they are there? They're there because of a call and response to the then president. So the idea that there isn't something terribly bad that is going to happen to someone, I mean, law enforcement can only be so good. And we're sitting here, and that's not a risk that people should be facing for doing their jobs. Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss are sort of classic examples of that, where that is not an inchoate. That's not some conspiracy that never worked. They are living with the consequences of those threats and that kind of language that was used with respect to them. So I'm praying that of course, that
right. We all want to be wrong, but I think that what we're saying, and I think what's so obvious and what's so harrowing to me about the posture of the current Republican Party, is that they think it won't happen to them. But Rusty Bowers would argue otherwise. So would Brad Raffensperger. So would his wife. I mean, eventually Trump turns the mob on everybody.
First of all, the lawyer, Andrew and I were talking about this before we came on today. The lawyer that signed the pleading answering Jack Smith's request to try to get this man to behave like any defendant in a criminal case is required to behave. I wonder if his hand was shaking when he signed the pleading, because it is against everything. Everybody, even Donald Trump, deserves a defense. I mean, that's our Constitution, and we revere it. So I get it that everybody deserves a defense, but they don't deserve having a lawyer that would do the kinds of things these lawyers are doing on his behalf. Secondly, I wish someone would put together some kind of video retrospective or a book, but the video would probably be more powerful, of all of the threats that are out there. I think if people could see someone coming to her 85-year-old grandfather's house to harass him, if they could hear the N-word being used as casually as you say good morning in the context of this incredibly accomplished professional woman, you know, if people were bombarded with how ugly this underbelly of the Trump support is, I think it would be a powerful thing in this country, because I think people hear it, you know, from her saying, oh, my family's being threatened, and but they don't really
they
feel
see her armor. They see her armor against
exactly.
it.
Exactly.
But we don't hear I mean, look, I think that's right. I think Alvin Bragg has also been targeted.
Exactly.
And you look at DOJ, and you look at the resources that DOJ has to protect its officials and its staff. And I imagine they dwarf the resources that some of these local prosecutors have. And I remember when Alvin Bragg was targeted by Trump and his supporters, and it was the same sort of thing. White powder that ended up being innocuous was sent to his. I mean, the call and response is so well established. I wonder if you think there's more that can be done to protect these people.
Well, just remember that there was a photo of Donald Trump with a baseball bat and Alvin Bragg's head. You know, I'm old enough to remember Roger Stone posting a picture of the judge overseeing his case with crosshairs on it, and then a hearing where he lied about it, in the same way that Donald Trump said, oh, I was doing a promotion for American products, it doesn't really require a bat and Alvin Bragg's head being in the same vicinity. To me, there's sort of two issues. One is when you are out on bail on one case, let alone 4 cases, not entitled to the same rights as the rest of us.
Right.
So this is not a First Amendment issue at all. This is an issue of restrictions that could be placed on your freedom when you are under indictment. And I think that is sort of the main issue for the courts to deal with before something happens. It really is something where you don't wait for the defendant to really incite violence to happen.
But I mean, to your point, all these Truth Social posts about the judges, the parallel in history is be there will be wild. I mean, he has called them before and they have answered before.
You know, and Nicolle, I think we all have to acknowledge that Trump gets a rush out of seeing people do lawless things in his name.
Right.
He loves it. It makes him feel powerful and successful to have these people out there, you know, doing a truck going up and down the street, Rusty Bowers' neighborhood, calling him a pedophile. That makes Donald Trump smile. That makes him feel vindicated. And that is truly sick. I mean, if you think about that, he's not upset about these people harassing and threatening these people. He thinks it's great.
And it works. I mean, here's the problem. This is, to me, I keep on going back to the report from Mitt Romney saying that there were senators who did not adhere to their oaths because they were afraid.
Mitch McConnell, they nailed him.